The first thing Ella Baptiste noticed about Kong Group's headquarters was that it was designed to make you feel small. 62 floors of glass and steel rising out of the Gangnam skyline like a monument to someone's ego, which, as she would later learn, was exactly what it was. The lobby alone was bigger than her entire apartment building back in Brooklyn. Black marble floors so polished you could see your reflection staring back at you like a warning. Receptionists in matching charcoal blazers who smiled with their mouths and assessed with their eyes. Art on the walls that cost more than some countries' GDP. The whole building breathed money and intimidation in equal measure. And as Ella stepped through the revolving doors on her first morning, rolling back her shoulders and adjusting the strap of her laptop bag, she made a quiet, private promise to herself. None of this is going to shake you, baby. She was right, but she didn't know yet just how hard the building, or rather, the man who owned it, was going to try. Ella was 29 years old, a structural systems engineer with a master's degree from Georgia Tech, 3 international certifications, and a reputation in her field that had gotten her headhunted by 3 different firms in the past 18 months alone. Kong Group had won the bidding war not because they offered the most money, though the salary package had genuinely made her sit down, but because they were building something that nobody had successfully built before. A fully integrated smart infrastructure system for a new mixed-use development district in Incheon, the kind of project that came along once in a career and made your name if you pulled it off. Ella had looked at the specs, called her grandmother in Kingston to ask for a prayer, and booked her flight to Seoul. She had been in Korea 8 months before she set foot inside Kong Group's tower. 8 months of language classes, neighborhood exploration, making friends. At the coffee shop 2 blocks from her apartment in Mapo, learning which subway lines ran fastest and which street food vendors were worth the wait. She had not rushed into the job. She had settled into the country first, because Ella Baptiste did not do anything halfway. Her mother had taught her that. Her grandmother had reinforced it. The women in her family moved with intention or they didn't move at all. She was ready. What she was not ready for, what no one had adequately warned her about, not the recruiter, not the HR coordinator who'd walked her through the contract, not a single one of the 3 LinkedIn connections she had who'd worked adjacent to Kong Group, was Kong Saiwon. She met him for the first time at 9:14 on a Tuesday morning, in the glass-walled conference room on the 41st floor where her new team was gathered for a project briefing. She had arrived at 8:50 because she was always early, had introduced herself to her 6 teammates, a mix of Korean and international engineers, all of whom seemed genuinely warm and slightly tired in the specific way of people who'd been grinding hard for a long time, and had set up her laptop and notebook and was reviewing the preliminary schematics when the door opened. The room changed. It was the only way she could describe it later, when she was telling her best friend Dominique about it over a voice note that lasted 47 minutes. The room changed the moment he walked in. The engineers who'd been chatting went quiet. One of her new colleagues, a Korean woman named Park Ji-yeon who would later become her closest friend in the office, sat up straighter so fast it looked like someone had yanked a string in her spine. Even the air conditioning seemed to hesitate. Kong Saiwon was 36 and looked like God had gotten very serious about the assignment. Tall for a Korean man, 6'1", maybe more, with a lean, angular build that his dark suit used well. His face was the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers and tended to make people forget what they were saying. Sharp-jawed and dark-eyed and arranged in an expression that communicated, with startling efficiency, that he had exactly 0 interest in being here and even less interest in you. His hair was pushed back from his forehead in a way that looked careless and certainly wasn't. He did not smile when he entered. He did not acknowledge the room's silent shift in posture. He sat at the head of the table, set down a single leather-bound notebook, and opened it without looking up. The Incheon project is 14 days behind the projected milestone. Someone tell me why. Not good morning. Not hello, let's get started. Just accusation, cold and clean, dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Ella watched her teammates absorb it. Watched the way they tightened, the way their eyes went careful, the way the team lead, a quiet man named Oh Hyun-soo, began to explain about a subcontractor delay with the careful phrasing of someone who had learned, over time, exactly how much honesty this man could tolerate before it became a liability. She watched Kong Saiwon listen to the explanation with the expression of someone being read a grocery list in a language they found personally offensive. He cut Oh Hyun-soo off mid-sentence. I didn't hire a team of engineers to tell me about subcontractor delays. I hired you to solve them. She saw Oh Hyun-soo's jaw tighten and then deliberately loosen. Saw him nod. Ella made a note in her notebook. Not about the project. About the man. Speaks over people. Uses "I hired you" as a weapon. Performs impatience as power. Does not listen to the end of sentences. She underlined the last one. Then Kang Saiwin turned his attention to her. She had expected it. She was new. She was the only new face in the room. She was also quite visibly the only black woman in a 62-floor building, which she had already clocked and filed away. As someone else's limitation, not mine. His gaze landed on her and stayed there for a beat longer than it needed to. Baptiste, he said. Her name not a greeting. Georgia Tech. 3 years at Meridian Infrastructure in Atlanta. 1 year consulting in Dubai. He had read her file. You've never worked on a project at this scale. I've never worked on a project at this scale in Korea, she corrected, pleasantly, meeting his eyes without blinking. The scale itself I'm familiar with. The Meridian Coastal Resilience Project in Miami was a comparable infrastructure footprint. And the Dubai consultancy was on a smart grid integration system that, I know what it was, he said. I'm telling you this is different. I understood that when I accepted the offer, she said. Still pleasant. Still direct. Not an inch of ground given. I wouldn't have come if I didn't think I could deliver. Something moved across his face. Not quite surprise. More like recalibration. Brief. Gone before it settled. He moved on. He spent the next 40 minutes dissecting the project timeline with the surgical precision of someone who understood engineering deeply and regarded the humans doing the engineering as necessary but somewhat inconvenient variables. He identified gaps in the substructure load analysis. Correctly, she noted he was not wrong, and he assigned correction timelines with the warmth of a court summons. By the time the meeting ended, 2 of her colleagues looked quietly miserable, and one had the 1,000-yard stare of someone doing complicated math about their life choices. Ella walked out of that conference room, went to the beautiful espresso machine in the team's kitchen, made herself a courte-du, stood at the window looking out over the Seoul skyline, and thought, okay, so that's how it is. She was not afraid. She was not demoralized. She was, if anything, sharply awake in the way she got when a problem clarified itself, when the parameters snapped into focus. And she could see exactly what she was working with. The project was extraordinary. The work was real. The team was good. Genuinely talented people who were operating below their potential because the environment had been carefully engineered to make them doubt themselves. And the boss was the kind of man who had never, in his life, encountered anyone who refused to shrink. Ella finished her courte-du, rinsed the cup, picked up her laptop bag, and walked back to her desk. Okay, Kang Saiwin, she thought, opening her project files. Let's see what you do with someone who doesn't shrink. She was spectacular at her job. There was no other word for it. Within her first 3 weeks, she had redesigned the load distribution model for the Incheon project's central hub in a way that recovered 9 of the 14 lost days and flagged a structural vulnerability in the original plan that, had it gone unaddressed, would have cost the project an estimated 2 billion won in remediation down the line. She presented her findings in a team meeting with the clarity and confidence of someone who had spent years learning how to make complex systems legible to rooms full of people. Colorful, well-annotated schematics, plain language explanations, a sense of humor about the dense technical parts that made her teammates lean forward rather than glaze over. She stayed late when she needed to and left on time when she didn't, because she understood that martyrdom was not the same as excellence. She brought food sometimes. The Jamaican beef patties she made from her grandmother's recipe on Sunday afternoons, or the Korean snacks she was still enthusiastically discovering, laid out on the team kitchen counter with a little sticky note that said, "For my people," and watched the way her teammates' shoulders dropped an inch when they ate something warm in the middle of a hard day. Park Ji-yeon, who sat 2 desks from her and had the kind of dry wit that announced itself quietly, and then destroyed you, became her person by the end of the first month. They ate lunch together, walked to the subway together, sent each other memes in a group chat they'd named Surviving the Mothership. Ji-yeon had been at Kong Group for 4 years. She was one of the best mechanical engineers Ella had ever worked with, and she operated under a continuous low-level stress that Ella found heartbreaking and infuriating in equal measure. He told me my presentation was adequate last quarter, Ji-yeon said one afternoon over bibimbap, with the tone of someone reporting a weather event they had accepted but not forgiven. I had worked on it for 3 weeks. I found a materials cost reduction that saved the company 400 million won. Adequate? Ella repeated. His exact word. Ella pressed her lips together. Put down her spoon. Giona. That is not adequate behavior from a leader. He's not really a leader, Gion said, with the equanimity of someone who had processed this a long time ago. She searched for the word. A result extraction machine. Ella stared at her. A what? He extracts results. He does not care how they are produced. He does not care about the people who produce them. He only cares that they are produced on time and exceed the previous benchmark. She picked up her spoon again. This is just how he is. That, said Ella, is exactly the kind of thing people say right before something changes. Gion looked at her for a moment. Then, very quietly, she smiled. The change arrived on a Wednesday in her 6th week, in the 41st floor conference room, in front of the entire project team and 2 senior executives who had come up from the 38th floor for a progress review. Ella had prepared a comprehensive mid-project analysis. 22 slides, fully annotated, covering structural progress, timeline recovery, revised risk assessments, and a proposal for a phased integration approach in the 3rd quarter. That she was genuinely proud of. It was elegant, it was efficient, and it solved a scheduling conflict that had been quietly stressing the whole team for weeks. She presented it well. She always presented well. Her voice was clear and warm. She moved through complex material with ease. She read the room and adjusted her pace. She fielded questions from the 2 executives with the comfortable fluency of someone who knew her material cold. Her teammates were nodding. One of the executives was taking notes. Ella could feel the energy in the room, the particular quality of attention that told her this was landing. And then Kang Saiwan spoke. He had been at the end of the table, elbow on the armrest, 2 fingers pressed against his temple, watching her the way he watched everything, with total focus and zero warmth. When she finished, there was a moment of silence that felt like approval. Then, the phased integration model is inefficient. She waited. He didn't elaborate. Could you be more specific? She asked. It adds complexity to the Q3 handoff. We don't need more complexity, we need speed. The phased model actually reduces complexity at the Q3 handoff, she said, keeping her voice level. That's the point of it. The current single-stage handoff creates a 3-week window where the mechanical and structural teams are working in the same zone simultaneously, which is a coordination risk. The phased approach staggers that by. I've read it, he said. Then you've seen the coordination risk assessment on slide 17. Your assessment. My assessment, yes. Based on the site data, the subcontractor schedules, and 4 comparable projects I've analyzed in the past 2 years. She paused. If you have a different reading of the coordination risk, I'd genuinely like to hear it. He looked at her. I'm not here to debate with junior engineers. The room went very still. Junior engineers. She had been called many things in her career. This was not the first time. Someone had tried to use a label to put distance between her and her own competence. She felt the old familiar flicker of heat in her chest, the one her grandmother called the Baptiste fire, and she did what she always did with it. She let it sharpen her. I'm the lead structural engineer on this project, she said, very calmly, very clearly. Not junior. And this isn't a debate. It's an engineering recommendation based on documented evidence. She held his gaze. But I understand if you'd like more time to review the analysis before responding to it. She smiled. Not small. Not apologetic. The full smile, warm and steady as sunlight. One of the executives cleared his throat. Kang Saiwan looked at her for a long moment with an expression she couldn't quite read. He did not respond. He closed his notebook, stood, and left the room. Ella turned back to her slides. Any other questions? She asked the room pleasantly. Under the table, out of sight, Park Ji-yeon pressed her foot against Ella's and kept it there. The incident happened on a Thursday. Ella would later refer to it, in the voice note to Dominique that clocked in at 1 hour and 12 minutes, as the day I set him straight in front of God and the entire project team, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. It had been building. Anyone paying attention could see it. The dynamic between Ella and Kang Saiwan had settled into a particular tension. Not hostile, exactly, but charged, like 2 electrical systems running parallel to each other, each generating its own field. He pushed and she didn't fold. He dismissed, and she redirected with evidence. He tried the junior engineer angle twice more after the first time, and both times she corrected it with the breezy, factual precision of someone swatting away a fly while continuing to read. Her work was too good to penalize, and he knew it. The timeline recovery she'd orchestrated had moved Incheon from 2 weeks behind to 3 days ahead of schedule. A fact that the executives on 38 had noticed and commented on in a company-wide update that Kang Saiwon had delivered without once naming her. That part she had noted, filed away, said nothing about publicly. But the team had noticed. The team always noticed. The specific incident began with Oh Hyun-soo's load analysis report. Oh Hyun-soo had been working on it for 2 weeks. She knew this because she had reviewed his preliminary data, offered suggestions, watched him refine and revise with the careful diligence of someone who cared deeply about his work and lived in constant low-grade terror of the man who would evaluate it. The final report was good. Not good, excellent. He had caught a soil compaction discrepancy in the eastern sector that no one else had flagged, and his proposed mitigation approach was clean and cost-effective and would save them a potential headache in year 3 of the project. She had told him so the morning before the review. He had smiled, a small, careful smile, and said thank you, Baptiste, and gone back to his desk to triple-check his formatting. The review was in the main conference room, 8 engineers, 2 department heads, Kang Saiwon at the head of the table. Oh Hyun-soo presented for 25 minutes. He was not a natural performer. His voice stayed a little flat when he was nervous, and he was nervous, but the content was airtight and everyone in that room with any engineering knowledge knew it. When he finished, he looked at Kang Saiwon. Kang Saiwon looked at the report. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, in the flat, carrying tone of someone who had decided what they were going to say before the presentation started. This is the level of analysis we expect from a first-year associate. Not from someone who has been on this team for 6 years. The room stopped breathing. Ella looked at Oh Hyun-soo. She watched the man's face do something she recognized, the careful, practiced recalibration of someone absorbing a blow they'd absorbed before, smoothing it over fast so it wouldn't show, nodding slightly because nodding was the safest response. She had watched this happen to her team members for 6 weeks. She had documented it in her private notes. She had discussed it with Jiyeon over lunch, analyzed it, contextualized it, made peace with the reality that this was an environment she hadn't built and couldn't dismantle, that her job was to do excellent work and protect her own peace and model something different for the people around her. But this was a different category. This was a man who had found the soil compaction discrepancy, saved the project from a year 3 crisis, produced an excellent piece of technical work, and was now sitting in a room full of his colleagues being told he had performed at the level of a first-year associate. By a man who hadn't even engaged with the substance of the report, who had delivered that verdict before Oh Hyun-soo had been given 30 seconds of silence for his work to land. The Baptiste fire didn't flicker this time. It stood up straight and cleared its throat. Actually, Ella said. Every head in the room turned. I want to push back on that. She said it lightly in the easy, conversational tone she used when she was about to be very precise. She opened her copy of the report on her laptop and turned the screen slightly toward the table. Hyun-soo SSI identified a soil compaction discrepancy in the eastern sector on page 12. I've been on 3 projects where that exact category of discrepancy wasn't caught until year 2. And in 2 of those cases the remediation cost exceeded the original mitigation budget by a factor of 4. The fact that he caught it now at this stage is not associate-level work. It's the kind of catch that senior forensic engineers get brought in specifically to make after the fact. She paused. Let that sit. Kang Saiwon's eyes were on her. The specific quality of his attention had changed. It was sharper now, more present, the way it got when something had surprised him and he was deciding what to do with the surprise. She wasn't done. And I've noticed, she continued, still pleasant, still even, still looking at him with the direct, unhurried gaze that she had inherited from a long line of women who had looked harder things in the face. That this is a pattern in how feedback gets delivered in this room. Work that is good gets called adequate. Work that is excellent gets evaluated against a standard that isn't stated, isn't consistent, and doesn't appear to have anything to do with the actual quality of the output. She tilted her head slightly, which creates an interesting question. Baptiste. His voice had a warning in it. If the standard is never defined, she said, ignoring the warning with the specific cheerfulness of someone who has decided the warning doesn't apply to them, and it's never met and nothing is ever acknowledged as good enough, then the question isn't whether the work is good. The question is what function the criticism is actually serving. She smiled at him, bright and direct and completely unintimidated. Because from where I'm sitting, it doesn't look like quality control. It looks like a management strategy. The silence in that room had a texture. Kang Saiwen stared at her. She held his gaze and did not look away and did not stop smiling. One of the department heads had gone very still in the way of someone watching a car accident happen in slow motion and finding it, against their will, riveting. Then Park Ji-yeon, 2 seats down, made a sound that she immediately converted into a cough that convinced absolutely no one. I don't need you, Kang Saiwen said, quietly, to psychoanalyze my management approach. Good, Ella said. Because I'm not a psychologist. I'm a structural engineer. So let me bring it back to the structure. She turned her laptop toward him. Eastern Sector schematic on screen. Oh Hyunsu's flag discrepancy, highlighted in blue. This catches excellent work. I want it on record that I said so. And I think when the year 3 phase rolls around and this sector is clean, Hyunsu SSI is going to be the reason why. She closed her laptop, looked at the room. Does anyone have technical questions about the report itself? Nobody spoke for 3 full seconds. Then one of the department heads said, carefully, I have a question about the mitigation timeline on page 15. And the meeting continued. Ella did not fully appreciate the magnitude of what had just happened until she was in the elevator going down to grab lunch, and Park Ji-yeon materialized beside her, grabbed her arm with both hands, and said in a low, strangled voice, Ella Baptiste, what was that? A professional observation, Ella said. He looked like someone had walked up and flicked him on the forehead. He looked, Ella said, like a man who has never been disagreed with by someone who wasn't afraid of him, which is a personal problem, not a professional one. Ji-yeon stared at her. The elevator doors opened and they stepped out into the lobby and Ji-yeon still had not let go of her arm. Are you not scared? Ji-yeon asked. Ella considered this sincerely. Of what? Of consequences. Of him. He owns this building, Ella. He owns 12 buildings. He has, you know what his family is involved in. I know, Ella said. She was not naive about the Kang family's business reach. She had done her research, knew the shape of the empire, understood that Kang Group's gleaming corporate face had other faces behind it that operated in different registers. She had assessed that information and reached a conclusion that her grandmother, had she heard it, would have recognized immediately. My grandmother used to say, you can't walk smaller to make a bully feel bigger, baby, because they'll just build a box around you. She pressed the crosswalk button. I'm not walking smaller. Ji-yeon was quiet for a moment. Then, your grandmother sounds incredible. She would eat this man for breakfast and then go tend her garden, Ella said. I'm just a pale imitation. Ji-yeon laughed. A real one, unguarded. The kind she didn't let herself have often in that building, and linked her arm through Ella's as the light changed. What Ella had not expected was what happened when she got back to her desk. Oh Hyunsu was waiting for her. He was standing at the end of her workstation, slightly formal in the way he stood when he was uncomfortable, and for a moment she thought, oh, here it comes, he's going to tell me I shouldn't have said anything, that it made things worse, that the culture doesn't work that way. Baptiste SSI, he said. And then, very quietly, thank you. She looked at him. No one has, he stopped, started again. In 6 years. No one has said that. He was looking at a point somewhere near her shoulder, the way people did when what they were saying was too real to be delivered with full eye contact. I know you didn't need to do that. I know it was a risk for you. But, he looked up briefly. Thank you. Ella felt something in her chest do a small, significant thing. You did excellent work, she said. Someone needed to say it. He nodded, went back to his desk. And Ella sat down, opened her laptop, and noticed that her hands were very slightly shaking. Not from fear, but from the specific adrenaline of having stood up and been seen standing up, which was, she had always found, its own kind of terrifying. She breathed through it. Then she opened her project files and got back to work. 2 weeks after the conference room incident, which had acquired that name organically, passed in low voices between the engineers of the 41st floor like a piece of oral history. The thing that Ella hadn't predicted happened. Kang Saiwen called her into his office alone. She got the message from his assistant at 11:15 on a Monday morning. Mr. Kong requests your presence at 2 p.m. Not a question. She read it, saved her work, and spent the next 45 minutes finishing a load analysis before she let herself think about what it might mean. Jion materialized at her desk at 12:30 with a lunchbox and enormous eyes. He summoned you. He did. Ella. Jion. Should you be concerned? Ella unwrapped her chopsticks. I've been doing my job excellently for 8 weeks. If there are concerns about my performance, they will need to be documented and specific, and I will respond to them with evidence. If there are concerns about my conduct in the conference room, she popped a piece of radish into her mouth. I'll say exactly what I said in the conference room, because it was accurate and professional and I stand behind it. You are the calmest person I have ever met, Jion said. I'm terrified, Ella said pleasantly. I'm just not going to let it show in his office. Kong Saiwan's office was on the 59th floor and occupied a corner with floor-to-ceiling windows that turned Seoul into a painting. She would have appreciated it more under different circumstances. His desk was vast and clean, a single monitor, a leather notebook, a glass of water. He was standing at the window when she came in, hands in his pockets, looking out. He turned when she entered. Sit down, he said. Thank you. She sat, crossed her ankles, settled her hands in her lap. She was wearing a deep plum structured blazer over a black fitted turtleneck. Her locks pinned up in a high, elaborate updo with 2 loose pieces framing her face, gold drop earrings. Catching the light. She had not dressed for this meeting. She dressed like this every day, but she was aware, as she sometimes allowed herself to be, that she looked exceptionally good and that this was not irrelevant information. He sat across from her, looked at her for a moment. You've been here 8 weeks, he said. 9, she corrected. As of yesterday. His jaw moved slightly. 9 weeks. In that time you've recovered the Incheon timeline, identified the Eastern Sector compaction issue before Hyunsu's report, redesigned the Q3 integration model, and produced what the 38th floor is calling the strongest mid-project analysis they've seen on this development. She waited. Compliments from this man, she suspected, were structurally indistinguishable from build-up. You also, he said, contradicted me in a room full of my senior staff and 2 department heads. I provided an engineering assessment that differed from your characterization of a colleague's work, she said, which I stand by. I'm aware you stand by it. Was the compaction catch first-year work? She asked directly. He looked at her. A long moment. No, he said. The word landed in the room like something that had been carried a long way. She kept her expression neutral, but internally noted. He can say it. He just never does. Then the record should reflect that, she said. Hyunsu SSI has been on your team for 6 years. His institutional knowledge of this project is irreplaceable. If he doesn't know that his contributions are valued, she held Saiwan's gaze. You're going to lose him, and then you'll spend 8 months training someone to the level he's already at, on a project that can't afford that kind of interruption. You're telling me how to manage my team. I'm telling you what I observe as a structural engineer, she said. Systems fail when load-bearing elements are undersupported. That applies to people too. He stared at her. Something was working behind his eyes. The recalibration again, more prolonged this time, like a calculation that kept returning different results. You grew up in New York, he said, unexpectedly. Brooklyn, she said. Flatbush, specifically. My mom's side. Spent summers in Jamaica with my grandmother. Your grandmother. She raised me, mostly. Mama worked nights. She said it without drama. She's the most no-nonsense person you've ever met in your life. She used to say, Ella, if they won't see your worth, show them the receipts. She smiled slightly. I have very good receipts. He was quiet. Then, and she would analyze this later from multiple angles and still find it slightly startling. Why aren't you afraid of me? It was a genuine question. She could hear it. She considered her answer. Because I know exactly what I bring to this project, she said. And because I was raised by women who work twice as hard for half the credit their whole lives. And I made a decision a long time ago that I wasn't going to do that. Not because I'm ungrateful or arrogant. She looked at him steadily. But because the work deserves to be seen, not just mine. Everyone on your team. He leaned back in his chair. Something in his posture had shifted. The precise, deliberate containment he wore like armor had relaxed by a fraction. And she noticed because she noticed everything. You think I'm a bad leader, he said. I think, she said carefully, that you're an exceptionally capable strategist who runs his team like a machine because that's how you learn to produce results. And I think that worked for a long time. And I think, she paused, chose the last part precisely, that the people on your team are talented enough to give you so much more if they were given a reason to believe you saw it. The silence in the room was different from the conference room silence. That one had been charged with shock. This one was something else, more interior. He looked out the window. The Eastern Sector mitigation. Hyun-soo proposed, he said finally. It's being adopted in the final project plan. Good, she said. His name will be on the implementation documentation. She held very still. As lead, Siwon said. For that section. She breathed slowly. Did not smile because this moment was too serious for performance, but felt something in her chest settle. The particular satisfaction of a load-bearing wall doing exactly what it was designed to do. He'll do well with it, she said. She left his office at 2:47 and took the elevator back to 41 and sat down at her desk and opened her project files. Ji-yeon was watching her from across the room with the intensity of a woman who needed information immediately. Ella typed for 30 seconds, then looked up and gave Ji-yeon a single nod. Ji-yeon exhaled visibly, picked up her pen, went back to work. It was not a transformation. Ella knew better than to expect transformations from single conversations, even good ones. Kang Siwon had not emerged from that meeting a changed man. He was still cold at the Tuesday briefing, still terse in his feedback, still moved through his company like he owned everything in it, which he did, which would probably always shape the way he occupied space. People like him didn't get soft. They got occasionally accurate. And accuracy, in Ella's experience, was more useful than soft. But Oh Hyun-soo got the lead designation on the Eastern Sector mitigation. And when the acknowledgement went out on the internal communications channel, something in the 41st floor shifted not dramatically, not irreversibly, but genuinely the way a room shifts when a window is finally opened and the stale air moves. Ella noticed it. She always noticed things. She went home that evening to her apartment in Mapo, changed into a big old university sweatshirt and her most comfortable shorts, called her grandmother on FaceTime, and described the whole 9 weeks in loving detail while Grandma Ivy sat in her Kingston garden with a glass of sorrel and made the face she made when she was proud but wasn't going to say so directly, which meant she was extremely proud. So the big-shot billionaire called you into his office, Grandma Ivy said. He did. And I think he heard me. You think. We'll see. Grandma Ivy sucked her teeth affectionately. You get that from your grandfather, you know. That we'll see. He used to drive me absolutely. She waved a hand. But you handled yourself? I always handle myself, Grandma. Yes, you do, baby. Grandma Ivy looked at her through the screen. Really looked the way she had been looking since Ella was 3 years old. The look that saw everything. Yes, you do. Ella pulled her knees to her chest and smiled. Outside her window, Seoul hummed and glittered and went about its enormous, complicated, relentless business. Somewhere in a tower in Gangnam, a project was running 3 days ahead of schedule. A man who had never acknowledged anyone's work had put a name on a document that would outlast the meeting that produced it. And Ella Baptiste. 9 weeks into a country that wasn't hers and a project that was changing her career and a situation that had tried very sincerely to make her small. Sat in her apartment, full of her grandmother's voice and her own quiet satisfaction, and felt exactly the size she had always been, which was and always had been more than enough.
So best case, in this story we learned that your worth doesn't need anyone's approval to be real. Show up, do excellent work, know your value, and never shrink yourself to make someone comfortable in their own smallness. The right people will see it, and the wrong ones, they will learn. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe, and share.